the fact that there's a general interest in urbanism and sustainability and transportation, I think, is a wonderful thing. So people care about this stuff, and they understand the impact on their quality of life. And a lot of it is because they see the visual changes on the street. And they want to live in cities again. There's all kinds of new technology. This is a friend of mine, Esther Dyson, Freeman Dyson's daughter, and she grew up in New York City, and I was letting her try my Elf, which is a velomobile. It's a cross between a car and a bike. So you pedal it, but it's got solar panels on the roof, and it's got a little 7-pound battery. A Tesla's got about 3,500 pounds of batteries. And it goes about 90 miles on a charge, and it charges itself. So Esther said to me, she said, you know what? I'm like 50-something years old, and I've never driven a car. It's my first time. So there's all kinds of new technology. I was in Portland recently for ULI, and they're starting to switch over delivery of food to restaurants to these things. This is an electric trike with refrigeration on the back. So there's all kinds of cool stuff, much of it from the private sector, springing up. I work in Cambridge 2 days a week, and I'm sure a lot of you go to Cambridge. They've raised crosswalks everywhere, like they do in Northern Europe. So if you're entering a local street, you really feel like you're a guest as an automobile driver in that area. So we're starting to prioritize active transportation again. So there's good stuff happening. I was out in Vancouver, and they've gone beyond what we're doing really in this country, which is trying to reallocate some space for bikes, and they're building streets with space for bikes. And when you do that, suddenly people start to bike, because you build it and they will come. You build highways, they will drive. You build streetcars, they will take the streetcar. You build bike lanes, they will bike. There's even a recognition outside of cities that we gotta slow down. At 40 miles an hour, if you hit somebody, there's a 95% chance that they're gonna die. When you hit them at 20, there's an 80% chance that they're gonna live. So there's a reason we have speed limits. And the difference between 20 and 40 is literally life and death. And bike share systems. Bike share systems went from being this sort of kitschy, interesting thing, maybe the tourists would use it. In DC, we had the first bike share system before Capital Bike Share called Smart Bike. We had 10 stations and 100 bikes. And for a city our size, that was pretty small. But it was a pilot program. And people, use it a little bit. But once we put in 100 stations with Arlington, Virginia, and 1,000 bikes, it became a part of the transportation landscape. Now there's 200 stations in the district, I think about 350 region-wide, and it's in 3 states. And you can start with 20, but then you want to get to 30 and 40 and 50 and 100 and make it a primary mode of transportation. I got to work on the private sector side. I actually went to France and found these bikes. They're very cool bikes. This just launched. I think there's 50 stations launching in Seattle, sponsored by Alaska Airlines. There's a lot of different ways to fund these things. The way I found that has worked for me was to use public money to capitalize it, and then use private money basically to fund the operations. But there's a million different models. In this case, a nonprofit actually runs the system. And when we think of technology, we tend to just think about apps on our phone. Technology has really hit our public way, and in a positive way. So that first generation bike share system that we had in DC, it was a $70,000 2-month construction project to integrate with the power lines and put new sidewalks in concrete. This takes 45 minutes to put in. The system that you guys are gonna have is even faster than this. These are solar powered, modular. Yours will be stationless, I think. I mean, it'll have stations, but you don't have to leave it at a station. So the technology is evolving so quickly. And in Chicago, we launched 300 stations, and it was $22 million, which might seem like a lot of money, but that's a drop in the bucket. Some of our bridges are $300 and $400 million just for a bridge. And that's something that people don't think about. When they think about, hey, let's build this highway or this road to nowhere or this bridge or whatever it is, nobody calculates the maintenance costs or the cost to rebuild it. One state, it was Massachusetts actually. Davies said a few times, like, we're not building any more roads. We're just not going to do it. Don't need them, can't afford it. That's smart. And government has realized that it's not just about putting something out there, you gotta actually market it well. You have to actually market it like Coke would market sugar water, but we're doing something good, right? And so we actually worked with IDEO, which designed the Apple mouse, amongst many other things. They're one of the best branding firms in the country. We spent some money, because this was not a small program for us. And Chicago loved it. In fact, the front page of the paper at one point put up a big heart and said, "Chicago loves Divvy." And if you know the press in Chicago, I mean, that's a miracle. It's an absolute miracle. That's actually my wife. Don't tell her she's in here. She was pregnant at the time. But we started fun programs where we'd have like one red bike in the entire system or one pink bike, and people would start to take pictures of it and became the social media phenomena. And people would stop their car, park, get out of the car, and get on that one red bike, or in this case, the pink bike, because they thought it was fun. Not everything has to be a mega project. You know, if you look at a lot of the work that was done in New York City under my friend Jeanette Sadekhan, you know, you take a place like this, like what does this look like? This looks like a place you want to work, right? This is a workplace. Very inexpensively, probably less than $10,000 or $20,000, you can make it into a place where people want to live, work, and play. It has a completely different feeling. And you don't have to do a massive construction project. You can down the road. I mean, Times Square she did as a pilot, you know, getting rid of all the cars in Times Square. Now it's being done permanently. But it's very important to actually get things done. So you look at those bike lanes I was talking about. This is what was going on before Ram and I came in, and this is what happened after we got there. Again, no budget, no plan. But the mayor came out and said we're going to do 100 miles of next generation bike facilities in Chicago. And then we had to figure it out. And we did. In the first year, we had no money. So we did all the outreach. We figured out where the network should go. And then we cross-reference where are we doing paving, or where are the utilities doing paving? And where can we basically do these for free, because we have to restripe the roads anyway. And that's what we did. The urban street design guidelines from NACTO, I strongly advise people to check them out and to use them. The federal DOT has endorsed them. Federal Highways has endorsed them. They've been pushing it down. So states should be very open-minded to building your streets in a new way for people instead of cars. And when I was at ULI, this along with the state of California endorsed them was really a big deal. And here's what happened, right? People realized this is good for business. I mean, that's how things change. You know, ULI looked at this and realized, like, hey, the real estate around these changes is worth a hell of a lot more than the real estate where you just have a car-centric area or you have a freeway nearby. It destroys the value of property. And now that we have enough of these facilities done, where whether it be next generation public spaces, pop-up public spaces, protected bike facilities, safer ped areas, you see not only a big jump in safety, and by the way, there's a direct correlation, you also see a big jump in retail. Because nobody wants to hang out in an area that's not safe. Nobody's gonna raise their kids in an area that's not safe. Again, talking about safety, you look at some of the most successful areas of the country, they also are some of the safest, and Rhode Island is right there. DC, by the way, which is number one, more of an urban context, but has seen an 83% decline in all traffic fatalities over 10 years. So we had a Vision Zero when nobody knew what Vision Zero was, and we are heading towards zero. And we also have one of the strongest automated enforcement systems in the country that even dings people for running stop signs. So if you run a stop sign in DC, chances are you're gonna get a ticket from a camera. But I'd much rather have that than be distracted by my phone and run over a child, you know? So automated enforcement works. And Rhode Island has not seen as much of a drop as some other places. So that's something probably to work on. Part 3, you know, we realize we've made some horrible mistakes. I think most people understand that now. So how do we get where we need to go? For one thing, the actual DOT has to change, or the government has to change. I can tell you in Chicago, Ram and I never talked about transportation, really. You can go look at the press conferences we have. We talked about the benefits to people. We talked about the outcomes. We talked about enhancing people's health. For the mayor, it was all about jobs. Like bike lanes were all about jobs. Bike lane equal jobs. He wanted people, we had 61 colleges and universities in Chicago, in the city. And a lot of those people would graduate and move to the coast. And he wanted to create an environment that made young people want to stay in the city. And let me tell you something, bike lanes, streetcars, pop-up cafes, that kind of stuff creates place, and that's what people want. So we created an agenda with about 120 metrics that we committed to hit over 2 years, and we did the same thing in DC. But we backed it up also with long-term plans. We had a pedestrian plan, a cycling plan, a complete streets plan, and a sustainability plan that fed into our 2-year plan. We also made bold statements and pronouncements that we are going to prioritize other things. Because a lot of times politically, people don't want to say that. They just want to not say it, and maybe we're going to work on the pedestrian stuff, but it's okay if most people think we're going to prioritize the car. We publicly went out and said we are not prioritizing the car anymore. The pedestrian is the indicator species of a healthy city, not the automobile. And so we're going to redesign around people instead of a particular mode of transportation. And I understand you guys have your first parklet here in Providence. We have ones that were $1,000, and then we have ones like this that were $70,000 that are modular. You can take them apart. This is won National Design Awards. Here's a less expensive one. It's basically just decking and planters. But here's the interesting thing. ULI did a study, talked to private sector and public sector people. What we're investing in is the inverse of what we need to invest in. We have great healthcare facilities. We keep spending more and more money on that. We're not investing in the things that make our cities places where people want to live. We're bootstrapping it, but we need to spend a lot more if we want to be like Amsterdam or Tokyo or other places. So the streetcar, in a lot of places, very controversial. And I'll tell you why it's controversial, because almost nobody remembers how great the cities were with the streetcar. I've met people in DC who are in their 80s who used to ride the streetcar, and they said, when they closed the streetcar, all my neighbors left. They all moved out of the city. It was a trend. I mean, it wasn't just the streetcar. It was, post-war. Everybody thought, I can get a white picket fence. It was the American dream. But these folks used to take a streetcar down and do all the shopping. They didn't have any cars. And they felt that when the streetcar was ripped out, people felt abandoned. And when you go to Wikipedia, look at the demographic trends, because for every city, it shows you when the population went up and down. There's almost always a direct correlation within 5 years of the streetcar being taken out, the population dropped dramatically. Here's Providence, and I forget the street. It starts with a W. Westminster. Look at all the people on Westminster. Streetcar tracks, there's a streetcar actually up there. There's the horse and buggy. I mean, this is the epitome of an active street. It's beautiful. That was, by the way, 1903. This is 1910. Now you see the streetcar over there in the town square, but you see the car culture started to take over. So in 1900, we had 8,000 cars in the United States. By 1930, we had 28 million of these pods running around. When people think about streetcars, they think of one thing. They think of the Portland streetcar, which I love. But when you go to Europe, you'll see, or Asia, you can run a streetcar absolutely anywhere. You can run it in a greenway, through a park, down a street, and give it its own right-of-way. It's actually very versatile. I worked very hard on the DC streetcar. It's actually up and running now. It's not in revenue service yet. It will be in about a month. When we put this in, when we announced it, and started going to construction, every single parcel of real estate was bought up on the entire corridor. The highlight of this corridor at the time was Murray's Steaks. If you've lived down south, you know Murray's Steaks is a very low quality grocery store. We have a $1.6 billion design, build, operate, maintain contract on the street to build somewhere between 8 miles and 37 miles. They're still figuring out because it's controversial. Some people don't want to fund it. Some people want to fund it. Do you know who wants the streetcar more than anybody? The developers. They've already seen huge, huge profits on H Street. And so they're the ones that are pushing it. And the young people, the next generation, they want to live in places like Providence with a streetcar and bike lanes and public cafe space. They don't care about owning a car or a house. They just don't care. They want the experience of life. And I would just encourage everybody, particularly those in government, to embrace some of the new business models that are coming along. And if government embraces it versus fighting it, you can shape the change, whether it's autonomous vehicles or ride sharing or anything else. And by the way, thank God for Amtrak. We cannot get rid of Amtrak. That's the only thing we have right now that connects our regions, but we do need to invest in high-speed rail over time like they have in Asia and Europe. This is my last slide. This is my new daughter and my new bike. It's actually her new bike, but people tell me I'm lying. It's really my new bike. But at the end of the day, it's all about people. And the reason that I've been doing this work over the last 10 years is for all of my friends and my friends' kids and all the people like yourselves. And now that I have a daughter, finally, I waited as long as humanly possible. You know, I'm doing it for her. And I think that as a people, as a government, as cities, we're only as good as the service that we're providing for the smallest people and the oldest people and the most disabled people and the poorest people. And if we design our cities for those people, everybody else will be fine. Thank you so much for listening.